I don't think Moses needs to catch anybody at a certain point in their career or anything like that. I think he's a generational talent. We'll send him his sparring at 2 a.m. He'll be texting us clips like, is this more what you want?
He's a student.
Yeah, he absolutely loves it.
All of them I like, but specifically Nick Ball, because I think, A, he was robbed out of the Ray Vargas fight, which I think was appalling.
Dan Goodman's a good fighter, you know, he's undefeated, comes forward, walks forward in straight lines, doesn't move his head. You can't do that with Nick Ball. You have to be a little bit more creative than that with Nick Ball, because Nick Ball showed that he can adapt.
Your favourite subject, you can crawl up Anthony Joshua's arse now.
Roll the dice is like, that was something that he'd worked on throughout camp. Double jab, bring it up the middle.
Right. So do you want him to have a tune-up fight? Like Deontay Wilder?
I mean, it's hard to say Deontay Wilder's a tune-up fight. I know what you're saying, where he's at now.
What's left of Deontay Wilder is, yeah. I know I mean-spiritedly called it the battle of the losers, but I don't mean losers in the absolute term. I meant the two guys that have lost and the two world title fighters have gone on. I
think probably the better way, more respectful way to put it is the two fighters that are probably slightly past the peak.
Welcome to episode 125 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. Joining us today is one of the brightest trainers in the boxing scene, Ben Davison. Nice to see you, Ben. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
You've been doing your Alan Wicker impression, haven't you? Travelling around the world again. Where have you been? What have you been doing?
I have, mate. Yeah, we've been out in Ghana. So Amir Khan with...
Ahara Davis was fighting, wasn't he?
Ahara Davis was fighting out there, yeah. It was a great bill we had. Tabiti was on there as well, Andrew Tabiti was boxing on there. Amir Khan's nephew was also boxing on there.
Right.
It was an incredible event. It was in Bookham, Accra, at the Bookham Boxing Centre.
Right.
Bookham Boxing Arena, sorry. And, Sharaf, in association with Amir Khan Promotions, put on this boxing show. Mate, the boxing out there, the talent they've got out there is insane. And they obviously don't get that opportunity. And these kids... You know, these kids saw that opportunity, and the fights they had were incredible. There was a cruiserweight fight, Simon, Abdullah versus Mohammed, and when this fight started, as they were doing the ring walks, the heavens opened and it was teeming down. They had no cover on the ring, so the canvas, like there were puddles in the canvas. They got in there, they went toe to toe. It was like watching a movie, right? So in the second round, Mohammed gets dropped with this right hand. As he goes over, you see the water splash up, and that may have woke him up, if I'm honest. The water come up, like AJ sitting in the background, like you're just looking at it, going, you've got the former world heavyweight champion there. These guys are going toe to toe, and it went right down to the final bell. It's about a 2,000 seat capacity in there. Like, full up was an understatement. Like people were just flooding in. It was just one of those, like, I was commentating and a guy was literally sitting on my chair, mate. He was just like pushing his arse on my chair, and I'm just like, you're just looking around, there was nowhere else to go. So it was just, look, as an event, it was unbelievable. Yes, they've got teething problems. They had teething problems out there. Timing was terrible. We finished at 5:30 a.m.
Hotbed
but the
boxing.
fights were insane.
Azuma Nelson there?
Azuma Nelson. I went out to Azuma Nelson, done an interview with him. You can see that on the talkSPORT Boxing YouTube channel. That was brilliant. Spent time with him. It was 31 years ago, more or less to the day that I was out there turning professional. We went full circle. I learnt my trade from a guy called Alfred Cote, who was a world bantamweight champion at the time, taught me everything I knew, and Alfred lost his world title, sort of went off the radar a little bit, went to America, boxed too long, had a seizure, passed away at 52. I'm in the arena, like, walking past. I thought I saw a ghost because I looked and thought I saw Alfred, and it was his son. And we hooked up, and we sort of like, I closed a big chapter of my life because I met up with him, and met up with Yoffie, the old manager, and it was sensational. Nice. But we had a brilliant interview with Azuma Nelson.
Fantastic.
He's looking at getting involved in a big way as well. It'd be great if we opened up, wouldn't it? We opened up that region because it's sort of like pretty untouched, but African boxers are so good, but they don't get the opportunity because of that.
Well, we'll see, won't we? We'll see. Anywhere that boxing flourishes is a good thing for the sport, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about people that are looking forward to likely flourishing, which is Moses Itauma. Dillian Whyte, fight's been signed with a really good undercard. This fight, Ben, right fight for him at the right time? Moses?
I think it's a good name in terms of it being at the right time. I don't think the timing is too much of a factor. I don't think Moses needs to catch anybody at a certain point in their career or anything like that.
Why is that?
Because I think he's good enough. I think he's plenty good enough. I think he's a generational talent, and I think it's going to take time for everybody to see that. but I think everybody can see that he has the potential to
Can you
do
tell that, even though he's not been in against the levels that determine those outcomes? Because he's been in against various levels, and obviously a lot's made of the performance against Dempsey McKean, a lot's made of the performance against Marius Wack. I don't know how impressed I was against the Balogun performance, because to me it looked like a guy that wasn't anywhere near his level. But as a trainer, can you already make that sort of claim and go, forget about it, this is a generational talent, even though he hasn't been in against the levels? Yeah,
there's still things to be done to, you still have to go out there and do the things to be that and to be able to claim that that is what you are. But obviously I get a chance to see him a lot more in the gym than everybody else does. And I know that there isn't much, if ever, been a heavyweight that has the capabilities that he's got. Now, like I say, you still have to go out there and do the job.
Sure.
But those are the reasons why I don't feel like it's a case of him needing to catch anybody at the right time.
Because the questions reverberate about him that keep on getting thrown, and we're going to listen to various people talk about him in positive and perhaps slightly balanced perspective in a second. But the one question that gets asked a lot is, when he gets one on the chin, then we'll start to understand whether this explosive fighter that's walking through everybody else is able to take it when it's put on him.
Yeah.
You see that in training already?
Yeah, of course. I've seen him get hit in the gym and sneezed it off, not a problem. Now, in boxing, especially in the heavyweight division, if you get hit right, it's game over. We saw that with Fabio and Justice Hooley not too long ago. So is that something that you need to be relying on, or you should be relying on? Certainly not. But it isn't something that I'm concerned about.
You've got great heavyweights in the gym right now, and they're all at different stages of their career. You've got AJ that's in the twilight of his career. You've got Fabio Wardley that's now knocking on the door as the interim champion. And you've got Moses that is the prospect coming through and the highly talented next heavyweight generational great, right? So do they spar with each other at all? Do they work with each other?
I don't get them full out sparring too often, if ever, to be honest. But also have Alloys, who's a cruiserweight, but he mixes in as well. But they work with each other. I tried to create a team culture where they want to see each other do well. And I think you saw that when Fabio won Moses' reaction. That's really warming for me, because that's the type of environment you want to have. Because when it's all said and done, as you all know, you'll look back on those times. You want those times to be remembered in as good times. And part of that, to make that, is the company that you keep. So. Yeah, that's something that's really important to me. But they're all capable of hurting each other as well. And I've got the better this day, and I don't want to create that type of environment. So yes, they'll tech spar with each other and try to bring each other along.
I know you don't think that it's about timing of the fight and who is right to fight at the right time, but would it be right to suggest that Dillian Whyte's scalp is probably the biggest scalp that he's going to take or have taken recently, or taken full stop in his career?
Yeah. I think that goes without saying. I think so, yeah.
Well, interesting. I mean, obviously there's a lot of hype around Moses, and I am, of course, like most of us, very impressed with him. We had Carl Frampton on the show last week talking about him, comparing him to various people. Let's have a listen to what Carl said.
And I've said this, and I've had idiots online criticise me, but I mean it. He's probably similar to Tyson in terms of his stature. He's a little bit bigger than Tyson. Mike Tyson we're talking about here, but he's a better mover than Mike Tyson, like a bit more fluid. Tyson had big deliberate head movements, and he moved very, big, massive movements which use energy. Moses I think he's a smart fighter. He's got maybe the fastest hands in heavyweight boxing since Mike Tyson. I think personally he moves better than him. But obviously as he goes up through the levels, we'll see how good he is. I genuinely think the kid's a superstar in the making.
There's probably no greater hype to attach to a heavyweight prospect than comparing him to the Mike Tyson that came out and blasted everybody from 1985 up to 1990. Is he that?
Is he what?
Is he that good?
I think he is, yeah.
Is it a fair comparison? Okay, let me repackage it. Is it a fair comparison?
And I know that you're going to get hammered on the comments by this, because that historically happens. But Moses Itauma right now, when you look at him and the modern era of heavyweight boxing and boxers and his talent and where he's going to go to, it's not if he wins a world title, it's when he wins a world title. You hear the gym stories. We see the delivery in the ring as well. His timing, his foot control, space control, southpaw as well, speed of hand, the way he puts shots together, the creativity. He ticks every box. I know the one question you asked, Simon, is does he take a shot though? Can he take a shot? this man to my left will know that because he sees him
that's
on
why I
a
asked
daily
him.
basis.
Do you like that comparison? When you hear Tyson, it's an easy, lazy throwaway, isn't it? People just throw it. It's like Mike Tyson. Do you like that Tyson comparison? Do you think it's unnecessary, or in terms of counterproductive to what you want to achieve with him?
I think it's great for building hype. Tyson's one of the most still spoke about ever heavyweights that's ever been. So I think it's great in that sense. I think probably the biggest comparison I would say is how Mike Tyson loved the game, would always study fighters of the past, etc. Moses has that same love for it.
Does he?
Yeah, like we'll send him his sparring at 2 a.m. He'll be texting us clips like, is this more what you want?
He's a student.
Yeah, he absolutely loves it. And that's that, along with his maturity at his age.
Very composed, isn't he? Very composed. Yeah.
That is what is allowing him to achieve what he's achieving at such a young age.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of talented fighters out there, but not many that are...
Can execute it on the back of it, yeah. Look, we had Dave Allen on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he addressed the issue of Moses Itauma, and he had slightly different views. Have a listen to Dave.
I think he's an incredible prospect, but I think that's all he is still. We haven't seen him box for the British title yet. He's boxed his best win. The last fellow who boxed, the American guy, 41 years of age, who could punch and he could see, he knew what
Dempsey
he was doing.
McKean was not a bad win. The way that he won the fight,
I'm going to be honest, Dempsey McKean's British title level, you can't put Itauma in with Josie Parker. He shouldn't even be in that conversation. He's nowhere near. And I'm not saying for talent, I think offensively, already, even at this level, he's one of the best heavyweights in the world.
Yep.
He hasn't been hit back.
Yep.
Hasn't been put under pressure. Times I've seen him frustrated with Davison and Aspinall. It looks a bit debunk of ideas. So we need to sit him in with someone that's going to give him something back.
Who would you think then?
Franklin, I think, in a fight at 2's time.
Jermaine Franklin.
In a fight or 2, though. I'm not a big fan. He's 20 years of age as a heavyweight. I think he can be a heavyweight champion of the world. I'm a big fan of him. But talk of world titles for him already is absolutely ridiculous. He's miles off, really.
Straight to you, Ben. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I just think miles off in what sense? I understand what he's saying, looking from an outside perspective, but I don't think from our perspective there isn't anybody that we would look at and say, oh, he's not ready for him. Now, there's fights that are going to have a certain element of risk, and there's some fights that are going to have a similar element of risk but bring more reward. So there's understanding in that. There's gaining some experience, which we've tried to get in rounds against some of these guys, and they're not able to deliver. We thought we was going to get that with Maris Wack. We thought we was going to get that with Dempsey McKean. And we've not been able to get that. If that keeps happening, you're just good enough and you've got to go.
How did you, out of curiosity, how did you end up hooking up with Moses?
He went around, tried with a few different coaches when he had made the decision to make an adjustment. And I think I might have been the last coach that he come and tried out. And I think...
Do you pitch for it yourself? Do you put yourself in your hat in a ring, or do you just wait for someone to give you a call and say, listen, I quite fancy having a word with you?
No, I mean, he'd been down the gym sparring a few times. And I think he'd already had in his mind at this point that he wanted to go and try, had a few coaches in mind that he wanted to go and try. And we was prepared. He come and saw us and liked the work, and we enjoyed working with him.
Do you have your heavyweights working together in the gym at the same time, or do you have time slots? How does that work?
Yeah, so sometimes I'll pair them up together. Sometimes they'll have their individual slot, depending on what they're working on. And it won't always be the same weight class. It might be somebody at welterweight is working on a certain area of his game, and a heavyweight might be working on that same area of his game. We might pair them together to do the session together. They can then watch what's he working on. Oh, he does that well. Then there might be times where actually we need individual work here, and then we'll slot it out throughout the day.
Is it a challenge for you to get sparring partners for him?
I was just explaining this back there, actually. There was a period where he probably wasn't having fights big enough to be flying people in, putting them in hotels, paying them to come. That's a real challenge.
Right.
Fortunately, we're now past that stage where he's able to set up a camp, bring people in. It's not so much of a challenge. But during that period, that was really difficult to get people to come and spar. Now it's still tough to bring people, for them to still want to carry on and be able to do the rounds. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's the main factor. He's now in a position where he's able to set camp up.
If and when, in your assumption, he beats Dillian Whyte, how long do you think it's going to be? Put aside, I know, some of the bureaucracy about getting world title fights and how the belts may or may not be freed up, but in your mind's eye, if and when he beats Dillian in August, How long do you think it's going to be before he gets his world title shot, which ultimately you would suspect him to probably win?
I think from a perspective of, as a coach, taking the politics aside, as you said, I think it would be a case of what does Dillian bring and what do we get out of that fight? How does that fight end up going? Are there areas that pop up for us to go, need work on that, etc.? Or maybe not. Maybe it looks like he's ready. Then we have to look at the situation. What happens with Usyk and Dubois? Do the belts get fragmented? Because if they do, he's in a great position to be next. So, yeah, I think
I know you say there you'll take that fight by fight, which is totally the right thing to do with a kid of this ability. And when you get those tests, which like Simon's alluding to, you know, and he's coming through those, like Dillian Whyte being a great example, and he comes through those with flying colours. You go, if those titles do fragment, one of them comes up, he's the WBO number one, right? So he's the WBO one, Parker's the interim champion. That fight could possibly happen if that WBO title, let's just say fantasy, that title becomes vacant. Would you take that fight?
Yes.
You take that fight now?
Yes.
I want to throw it back to you then, Simon. Would you think that Moses Itauma coming through the Dillian Whyte fight and that opportunity comes up, do you think he's ready for that?
Depends what we see in the Dillian Whyte fight, which is exactly what Ben has said. It depends what Dillian Whyte is presented and what stage Dillian's at, because he wasn't impressive in his last fight, was he? And on paper, this looks like if Moses goes in there and cleans out Dillian Whyte, people are going to go, hold on a second, he's done it to Dempsey McKean, he's done it to Maris Wack, he's done it to a former world title contender that was expected to get back in the mix, who wasn't 2 years ago, you know, going to be fighting Anthony Joshua again. So it all depends. I mean, I get the impression that this kid is a superstar. I get the impression he has all the tools. And when I ask the question, it's because I'm playing devil's advocate, not because I don't think you can take a punch. I think you have to play devil's advocate to get certain conversations going. But I think we're looking at the future of heavyweight boxing, tragically, perhaps for Daniel Dubois, who I think right now could be Alexander Usyk, have his time, but I think his time might be short if Itauma gets the passage of opportunities that I think he's going to get.
I think that if
he
comes through, I think absolutely. Listen, I think if he comes through Dillian Whyte fight and he comes through it, you know, flies through that one, you go, he's ready. You can't hold him back. Him and Joseph Parker is a fight that should happen.
I want to see him go rounds. I want to see it get a bit sticky. I want to see it get a little bit stickier than it's been.
Being
currently.
honest, as mad as it sounds, so do we, and that's why we've tried to match him with people that we thought would bring that.
Give him that, yeah. Let's move on from Moses. And obviously, I mentioned at the top of this discussion that we've got a brilliant undercard. And it's made up of a variety of different fighters. One of them I really like. All of them I like, but specifically Nick Ball, because I think, A, he was robbed out of the Ray Vargas fight, which I think was appalling. Went and beat Ray Ford. Had a couple of fights that I think were, I don't want them to be mean-spirited, but a little bit gimme in terms of he had a homecoming at Liverpool against a number 15 fighter in the world, which I think he earns. But he's going in against Sam Goodman, who's coming up from super bantamweight. That's a good fight, a challenging fight.
For me, it's a foregone conclusion, that fight. I think that Nick Ball all day. Sam Goodman's a good fighter. You know, he's undefeated. He's an undefeated fighter, 20 fights, 8 inside the distance, comes forward, walks forward in straight lines, doesn't move his head. You can't do that with Nick Ball. You have to be a little bit more creative than that with Nick Ball, because Nick Ball showed that he can adapt if things are not going his way, like against TJ Doheny last time out. The guy, he adapted and he showed that if things are not going his way, he can do it on the back foot or whatever. Goodman, as good as he is not good enough.
You see it that way?
I haven't watched much of Sam Goodman, to be honest, but very high on Nick Ball. I've seen a little bit of Sam Goodman, and every time I've seen him, as Spencer said, he's been on the front foot. I don't think that's going to be the case in this fight, so I haven't got anything to say what's Sam Goodman like on the back foot to say that's how I feel. But very high on Nick Ball, fantastic fighter, and again, great matchup that I'm looking forward to.
If he were to pass this test, which, I mean, I'm not going to tip, because every time I tip, I people and get it wrong, namely myself, right? But if he passes this test, Nick, it has to be someone like a Nui next, isn't it? Or that's an opportunity that should be his to have. How would you see that sort of opportunity? Because I think people have got mixed emotions about that. Yeah,
Nui's been dropped the last, I think, twice out of his last 3 fights at super bantamweight. He's been hanging around that super bantamweight division when he was expected to move up to featherweight already. So I'm not sure if he will do that or not.
Right.
If he does, I think he's a great matchup. Inui's got the capabilities on the back foot, brilliant on the counter to make that a great matchup. But again, Nick Ball, you know, really tough, great featherweight, tough fight for anybody in that division as well. So that would be like you say, the dream for us boxing fans to see.
To see that, yeah.
But I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
What about Anthony Kakachi? Obviously, he was in a great fight with your guy Lee Wood, going against Ray Ford. We just talked about Ray Ford, obviously being beaten by Nick Ball. What do you make of that fight for Anthony?
Really good fight. I think Ray Ford's a very good fighter.
Yeah.
The fight with Nick Ball was very close. Couldn't have argued either way, in my opinion. Interesting to see Ray Ford step up to super featherweight, which, as you mentioned, Lee Wood did. The only thing is, Kakachi's pretty much like a lightweight because he's already really big for super featherweight, which brings its own challenges. He's better than looks on the eye, Kakachi. So that's another great matchup and an intriguing one to see how that plays out.
What's going to happen with Lee? I mean, obviously, we've seen Kakachi now come to ascendancy. We saw what he did to Joe Cordina. We saw the fight with Lee. Lee's a lovely kid. Came in the studio, really enjoyed listening to him. You want him to do well, but conversely, you want Anthony Kakachi to do well. He's your fighter, I'm assuming still.
Yeah.
What is going to the expectation is Lee's not going to fight again. Is that the reality, or is there a change of direction potentially?
Yeah, I think he's got that. Just one more, which I don't think ever leaves, does it? But yeah, I think he's looking at potentially boxing again. So we'll see.
Do you want that for him?
If that's what he wants, the thing is with Lee, he's such a dedicated lad that he looks after himself really well. He's not the type to live a bad
Did it really hurt him,
life.
Ben, with the absence and going up a weight class? Does that give us enough of a gap in terms of the result to justify thinking, well, actually, Lee, you were out for 18 months for whatever reason, disputes left, right and centre. You've gone up a weight class. All of those things have not helped your cause. Does that give us enough chink of light to say, well, actually, come on, you should spin the wheel again, perhaps?
I think it does give that, but I don't think that's something that obviously it's not ideal, but we're not sitting here and saying that's the reason why we lost the fight. That would be bad on our end to do that from a coaching standpoint.
David Adelaide versus Filip Hrgović. This is a fight I quite liked for Moses. I quite liked actually for Fabio Wardley, and I'll talk about that in a second. But good fight, this, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit surprising that it isn't the rematch that we all talked about with Jamie TKV hasn't happened, and we'll ask about that in a second. But what do you think of this Adelaide-Hrgović match?
Great.
Too early for David?
Great matchup because it tells us exactly where... Listen, I think we know where Hrgović is. I think that we know exactly where he sits in this heavyweight division right now, but this is more about David Adelaide, and can he make that jump? Because this is a step up.
Were you impressed with Hrgović against Joe Joyce?
I think Hrgović is another one where he's a lot better than he looks on the eye.
Yeah.
I don't think he's made the progression that was probably expected of him early on in his career. I was really high on him early on in his career. But I think he's still a very, very good fighter, very intelligent. Doesn't look the slickest, but slight little adjustments that he's able to make or slight little things that he's able to pick up on, he's a very good fighter.
I mentioned it a moment ago. I mean, the expectation was... it was a piss-poor fight, but notwithstanding it, people still wanted to see it again because of the outcome. The Adelaide-Jamie TKV rematch, are you surprised that this hasn't happened and David's gone to Hrgović rather than to Jamie?
Not overly surprised, no. I think.
Why not?
I just think that... tough fight for David, Jamie, obviously.
Yeah.
Don't think the fight was going his way. I think that it's probably not as lucrative as a fight against somebody like Filip Hrgović in Saudi. And I think he's made that decision, which you can't blame him for.
Can you see Dave Allen fighting Jamie TKV?
I think so. I think that's a real possibility, yeah.
I think from a business perspective, I think from David Adelaide's point of view, that's a no-brainer.
I'm not pushing back against it. I'm just listening to all the nonsense that we heard in the studio, which was David was giving him a rematch. Everybody was on board with the reality of what they felt was a poor refereeing decision. And all of a sudden, like most things in life, everything changes. Anyway, that's the one thing you can rely on.
I think it's funny that Fraser Clark isn't currently getting mentioned in that mix as well, which I think he should be, being honest, in the British title. Nice. That sort of mix.
Absolutely. Your favourite subject, you can crawl up Anthony Joshua's arse now. Spence, before I do ask Ben about him, you saw him out in Ghana.
Yes.
We've heard various things, from not being in a happy state of mind to having surgery. How is the young man's spirits?
The young man's spirits are very good. We had a great conversation. Told me not to share that with you because you're always giving him So I thought, we'll have to stop it
I
there.
do not.
No, I'm only playing. No, he's in good spirits. He's waiting for the right fight to come along. The arm's getting better, and he's just waiting for the right opportunity. I think that we know where those opportunities lie. Deontay Wilder, possibly. Tyson Fury is obviously the guy with the target on his back. That's the biggest fight that he would like. But that's sort of pretty much where he's at. It was interesting to see him out in Africa as well. And we'd love to see a fight out there. Ben, I don't know if he's spoke to you about that, but I think that's something that would be on the tick list as well. But yeah, that's pretty much where he's at. But he's in very good spirits.
When was the last time you spoke to him?
Spoke to him the week after Moses Itauma and Luke McCormack boxed.
Right.
Just conversation, watch the fights, catch up, etc.
No, you're no training with him at this moment?
Not at the minute. He's had that elbow operation that you mentioned there, so still doing the recovery of that, which isn't something that I take control of.
Now, I'm not going to try and get up your nose, but I want to ask you this question about the Dubois fight. And I want you to listen to some VT of your observations in the corner, and then we'll come back to it after you've listened to it.
If there's a bit of a lull, in behind that double jab, bring it up, roll the dice, he'll double another right hand, lift it, yeah?
Roll the dice. Roll that dice, innit? Double in his eyes, bring it up. So at the start of this round, it'll come up fast. Yeah, so be ready, slip and bring it up. He'll slip you and be jab. Roll the dice. Roll that dice, innit? Double in his eyes, bring it up.
I think that's dangerous advice there, to be honest. I mean, getting him to bring it up off the double jab. Daniel throws that right hand straight off that double jab. And by bringing it up, he means an uppercut. He's going to walk himself straight onto his short right hand. If you ask me, I'd just say keep your hands up tight, get through these next 2 rounds.
Now, again, I'm not trying to be arsehole.
No.
What I'm trying to establish is there's two things. In my world, or my previous world, which is football, people don't criticise one another. Trainers, football coaches don't criticise one another. So I wanted to get what your reaction to what Shane has said, and also to clarify what it was that you were telling Anthony Joshua to do, because ultimately Shane's making an observation. The outcome that Shane was suggesting manifested itself. So walk me backwards.
So he's saying that Daniel puts a right hand behind the double. So he's saying Daniel Dubois throws a double jab, then a right hand. He would be 100% correct. That was Daniel's throwing that throughout the fight. We've asked AJ to throw a double jab and bring it up the middle. Daniel was defending AJ's right hand by ducking underneath it. Therefore, if he's ducking underneath your right hand, the correct adjustment is to let him dip onto the right uppercut.
But what's the roll of dice bit?
Roll the dice is that was something that he'd worked on throughout camp. Double jab, bring it up the middle. Right. Because against Hrgovic, he was, again, so often getting... Hold on, let me finish, sorry.
Yeah, go on.
He was regularly getting underneath Hrgovic's right hand. Hrgovic then started to throw an uppercut, but wasn't bringing his feet in to be close enough to deliver the shot.
I think that terminology, when you hear it say roll the dice, you're getting into those later rounds and you go, it's all busted in many ways and you've got to go for it. And I just feel... I felt that was the wrong advice at that time. And the reason I felt that was the wrong advice at that time is because the round before, he was starting to get himself... He had a torrid start to the fight and every round was going the wrong way and you're looking at it going, what do we do here? But just the round before, he seemed to be getting him together a little bit. And you go, I felt the roll the dice comments were premature on that whole situation.
Yeah, roll the dice didn't actually mean go out there and...
That's what everyone picked up on.
Of course, and I get that. What we meant was that's something you've worked on. You haven't thrown it once in the fight. Commit to it. Roll the dice in the sense that he's going to duck underneath it. That's what we meant. However, I totally respect. You're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. Maybe I was wrong. Yeah. I feel like...
But I'm asking you because it's clarity, because the only person that really knows what they meant and what was being said is you. The other question I wanted to ask you was about Anthony's disposition walking into the ring. Now, you may have answered it somewhere else again, but indulge me, because it concerned me, because all week, right, Anthony looked completely together, collected, cool, assured, even back to the nonsense, pull me in the situation when Frank was in the room and they were having a debate about you want to go now sort of stuff, back to the face-off a few months earlier. But what I saw walking into the ring was a completely different animal. Someone, I expected Daniel Dubois to be the rabbit in the headlights, for want of a better expression. I expected Daniel Dubois walking into an environment where 90-odd thousand people were there to anoint Anthony Joshua back to his rightful place at the top of the pyramids. have I read that completely wrong in terms of his disposition? Because he looked. I mean, am I right in this sense?
We both did, because it was actually Daniel
Dubois
that looked like the gladiator walking
but
in.
What
and
are you
AJ
seeing with your
was the one,
fighter?
but, like,
You're sending him out of the dressing room. He's with you, right? You're his guiding light. You're his influence. And I know in the past, Anthony Joshua has spent time listening to lots of people. I've heard him stories of him walking up in fights, asking the trainer of the fight before him that's doing raps, how do you think I should fight this fight? I've heard those stories about him. So you're a pivotal influence. What's going on there that seems to send him out in that condition? For want of better words.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I haven't watched the ring walk, but I've heard people talk about it. And again, you have to be careful in what you're saying, because we're here to supplement the fighter at the end of the day. We're not...
We mean you, yeah.
Yeah, you know, coaches. So... He's never once come out of an excuse.
Did you sense anything?
Anything like that?
Did you sense anything?
He was very... One thing I will say, and whether I should say it or not, he was... And it's not an excuse at all. He's never mentioned it. We don't mention it. Even though I'm mentioning it now, it's not the reason that we lost that fight. But he was very, very late arriving to the changing room for unforeseen circumstances, and it was a major rush,
right,
which wasn't ideal. Maybe that had an impact on his ring walk. I can't say yes or no, or I might watch his ring walk and say, do you know what, I don't see anything wrong. But again, it's not an excuse. But if what you guys are seeing is correct, maybe the fact that he was extremely late
didn't help.
What I will say about Anthony Joshua is that everything has to be meticulous, because he is an overthinker.
Yeah.
And as an ex-fighter, I know that if things are not in place, you're turning up at a fight and you're meant to be there an hour before you get there, your head does go and it's all over the place. And a fight of that magnitude, that sort of makes sense to me. I understand that totally.
No, I get it.
Because AJ is that guy.
Yeah, look, I've only worked a few fights with him, but the fights before, we had an extremely long warm-up. One of the reasons, was because Deontay Wilder was the fight before us, and it could have gone at any moment. So we ended up warming up for pretty much 12 rounds. Not working continuously for 12 rounds, but we had a very long warm-up. This time it was the complete opposite. It was a big rush. But again, just to clarify, that is not the reason.
No, I've got it. You've got it. You've made your point, and it's very clear that you're not suggesting that's the reason why you lost. But not helpful to lose one's focus at a time when you want to be completely committed to a regime that gets you into the right place for the right outcomes. Obviously, we're going to see Daniel go on and fight Usyk. Is there a desire from you as his trainer to see AJ in with the winner of that fight?
What do you mean?
Well, Daniel's going to fight...
Do I want to see him fight the winner?
Correct.
Well, of course, I'd like for him to have a heavyweight world title shot.
Sure, but next?
I'm not a massive one on the whole, everybody needs activity. He hasn't been because of the injury and that, so it's not ideal.
So do you want him to have a tune-up fight? Like Deontay Wilder?
I mean, it's hard to say Deontay Wilder's a tune-up fight. I know what you're saying, where he's at now.
What's left of Deontay Wilder is, yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know. It's a discussion that would need to happen. But I know that his goal is he would like to become a free-time.
Would you be influential in that decision-making process?
Yeah, of course they would ask me, what do I think? Do I think this is a good opponent, etc., etc.
He's always been vocal about inactivity being a big problem for him, on that on the mental side of things as well as the physical side of things with him.
So he's going to be
And he's going to be, so he's been out for 12 months.
That's what I'm saying.
Deontay Wilder would be that good fight, but then Wilder's boxing next week. He goes, so now you're looking at it going, well, does he need another one? So I understand where you're coming from, but I think AJ's at the position of his career where you sort of, excuse the expression, have to roll the dice and put him in with those names. And you've got, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder come to mind because they're the modern era fights that we need to see.
How many fights do you think
you take a gamble anywhere else?
Two questions there. So you answer Spencer.
Sorry. What?
So what I'm saying is they're the fights that they would obviously be the fights you go, that's the fights that you'd like, Wilder, Fury. But if there has to be a tune-up fight there, is that too much of a risk at this stage of his career? Because it's got to be someone of some sort of note, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everybody knows that there was conversations about a two-fight deal, one of those potentially being Dillian. Now, obviously, Moses is fighting Dillian, so I think that situation probably needs rethinking. So at the moment, I don't know is the answer.
Any conflict in your... I mean, ultimately, you've worked with both Tyson and you're currently working with Anthony Joshua. If that fight were to be made, I know I mean-spiritedly called it the battle of the losers, but I don't mean losers in the absolute term. I meant the two guys that have lost and the two world title fighters have gone on. Any
I think probably the better way, more respectful way to put it is the two fighters are probably slightly past the peak.
Probably right, yeah. But then they can't clip it and crop it up and make me look like a tit. Yeah. Saying, right? So ultimately, that's good for the producers. Any conflict in your emotions if you were to see Anthony Joshua go in against Tyson Fury?
Would I, I totally understand. It's not ideal, do you know what I mean? I've never had a falling out with any boxer that I've finished working with, and that's something I pride myself on. Nobody, hopefully anyway, has gone out and had bad things to say about me, and vice versa. But I think the relationship is mature enough, and we both, like myself and Tyson, both know what type of characters we are. There's no, it's not malicious. It's not, it's business, and I think we'd both understand that.
Simon, question for you. What would you do with Anthony Joshua right now?
Depends what my motivation for him was.
Yeah, but
if I was managing him, I wanted to make him some more money, I'd put him in against Tyson Fury. If I was looking at him through the prism of an honest individual and looked at actually, I sat here with you lot, right, saying, I don't care about Jermaine Franklin, I don't care about Robert Helenius, I don't care about Otto Warren, don't care about Francis Ngannou. I like the fact that he did what Fury should have done because the boxing world was slightly embarrassed by it. But I said to you, my view is that Anthony Joshua, if he gets one on the whistles, will get knocked out by the first live one. Nothing's changed. So from that point of view, he has been knocked out. So if I'm looking at it from a moral standpoint and saying, for the man...
But them fights there, the ones...
Well, let me answer the question.
You had to have.
I understand that. But what you're asking what I'll do with him now.
Yeah.
Right? So the fact that the kid's made a fortune, right, and doesn't need to make any more money, I would look at what he wanted to do against what was the best interest for him to do. And I would suggest that if he wanted to make some more money, then I'd put him with Tyson Fury. But my view is that it's a sum of diminishing returns. I think with Anthony, and I hope to be wrong, that I think he'll get beaten by quite a few of the fighters that are out there now. And I look at it and think to myself, what is the purpose of that? If you don't need the money, and really what you're going to be facing is potentially a diminishing of your reputation. Your reputation, and people can make their sly little comments about who he's lost to. Right?
So you don't think he can win a world title again?
No, I don't.
You think he should retire?
Well, that's unfair of me to say no, he can't, because I can't run the argument that Fabio Wardley can win one and then suggest that Anthony Joshua can't. But Anthony Joshua carries different baggage, different expectations, different weight on his shoulders. That poor bugger walks into a ring and everything goes up 10 degrees. And I saw it against Jermaine Franklin and I thought to myself, OK, I get it a little bit more. I get it. I went to watch him fight Joseph Parker down at Cardiff. It put my feet to sleep. I've been to see other fights that he's been in, right? And I admire him for his achievements. I was never on the Anthony Joshua bandwagon that he was the best thing since sliced bread, but I think he was a wonderful thing for British boxing. He did wonderfully for himself. He's won a world title twice, and that should not be taken away from anybody. But if you're asking me as a human being what I think is going to happen to him, I think that he'll get put in against the live one and he'll get knocked out again.
What do you think of Simon's comment? Said, do you believe...
I'm not trying to be insulting.
No. Do you believe there's a roadmap into winning a world title again?
Well, of course, when you're the name of when you've got the name and the achievements of somebody like Anthony Joshua, there's always going to be a path. Paths will open up for you, whether people like that or not. That's just the reality of it. The belts fragment, opportunities pop up, but like you say, you have to play it by ear and see. At the minute he's in a stage of recovery, see how he feels. He's had a long time out of training, long time out of the ring. Maybe he wants a fight, 2 fights, see how the land lies. And with the heavyweight division, things can change very, very quickly. Somebody takes a bad loss that all of a sudden everybody was high on, all of a sudden an opportunity pops up. You never know how the land can lie and the land can change.
Who are you picking for the Dubois Usyk fight?
I don't think the fight looks any different, to be honest. I think...
It's Usyk?
Yeah.
And before we leave the subject of Anthony and move on to any other business, when do you realistically expect to see him back in the ring?
Probably the end of the year.
Right. OK, we'll look forward to it. Ben, I want to talk to you about a particular stain on the boxing world, which is the doping stuff. And I wanted you to have a listen to a discussion I had with Adam Booth on my Upfront podcast a while ago and see what he says. Spencer Oliver talks about 60% of fighters. This guy, Malik, was talking about 50, 60% of fighters doping.
At the highest level you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
I've lost faith in the sport in that sense. I agree with them. I think it's rife. There are so many ways that now they can avoid detection. You've only got to mention a half credible possible reason why you failed a dope test, along with some well-funded lawyers, and you're probably going to get away with it.
Picking up from Adam's points, I mean, what's your thoughts on the landscape in terms of how prevalent it is, to Spencer's point, and Adam's reaction to it, and people like Derek Chisora that talk about the consequences of doping being a lifetime ban? What's your thought process on it all?
Sorry, what was the Derek Chisora bit there, sorry?
Lifetime ban. Anyone, no 3 strikes, no pissing about. You fail a PED, you're gone.
Yeah, you know, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. The only issue is that somebody, when there is a potential silly, innocent mistake, which might happen, you know, but if that is what solves it, that's what it needs to be, lifetime ban. I totally agree. I think the problem is that there isn't insurances, people, like Adam mentioned there, legal team, people being able to sue. If there's the slightest of grey areas, it is an issue. That is a major issue. In terms of how many fighters are doping, I don't know. That is the reality of it. I don't know. But we certainly need to be stricter on it, 100%. And there needs to be a better protocol in place to ensure the safety of the fighters, because that is paramount. Nothing else happens without that.
Well, eventually it's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Someone is going to fail a drugs test and someone's going to get really badly hurt.
But it shouldn't take that. That is the issue. It should not take that to happen. That is the issue.
The reality is, you know, because we've seen in recent times, people failing tests, getting off tests, etc., etc. The reality is that is going to happen. And it is going to take that, which is a shame for the sport, because it puts a dark stain on the sport of boxing. I think that...
Will that even solve it, though? Will it?
No.
How do they solve it?
Well, can I ask you a wider...
Lifetime bans.
Well, yeah.
Does that solve it?
Lifetime bans take away what people have earned, because ultimately the incentive is that people get paid so much money and they're prepared to roll the dice and take the risk, to use an expression. But let me ask a more pointed question. Do you believe it's... if a fighter is doping, that everybody will know? Because I think Adam Booth is of the mindset that it is not just related to the fighter. The people around him will be aware. Do you believe that?
I think sometimes it'd be hard for fighters to go and source these things and have the information to do these things, especially if they're under drug testing by themselves.
But as a trainer, you'd notice the marked improvement, wouldn't you, as well, wouldn't you?
Not always, no. I just think
the fighter and the trainer sort of like, you know, they are that close, and I just think that there will be. I don't care when a fighter's done for doping and everything else. There can't be no one in that team that doesn't know about that.
So you think the same? So then it should actually be a catch-all, shouldn't it? Anybody, if the fighter chooses to dope and the camp decides to allow that to go on, everybody
are the camp allowing it to go on. This is what I mean. Nowadays you have nutritionists, strength and conditioners that are outside of all this. They might know. They might see it more. Our job is the skill set. The actual skill set of boxing. I'm not watching them lift their weights and that. I'm not doing that. That might be more prevalent to the improvements in terms of stats, numbers, all these things are shooting up. I'm not blaming strength and conditioners here, by the way.
Yeah. I understand you were saying the complications are, it used to be when I was boxing, it was just your boxing trainer, you're training on everything.
Running.
Nutritionists, strength and conditioners.
Now it's multi-skill and delegated that to different
There's so many
factors.
people within a team, you know, when I'm looking at their skill set, they might be punching a little bit harder, might be a little bit fitter.
But that could be for a variety of reasons.
If I'm focused on their skill set, that's not something that I'm keeping track of and looking at the numbers to see whatever the percentage is of improvement. But something certainly needs to be done, and I don't know what that something is, because what you mentioned there is...
serious consequences. Speed it up.
Taking money away from fighters that you mentioned there. You know, all of a sudden, like Adam mentioned there, is correct. Good legal team, can you do that? Have you got proof that I was on it there? All of a sudden...
More transparency there, more visibility, quicker turnaround times. I think are all part and parcel of it. But listen, it's one of those squares that hopefully, or one of those circles that will hopefully be squared at some point. What do you make? You've obviously got this super fight coming up in September, which is Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford. I have mixed emotions about this fight. I have mixed emotions about people jumping up 2 or 3 weight classes. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm leaning towards Terence Crawford as my pick, but notwithstanding that, I get it wrong most of the time, so that's probably worth ignoring. What do you think of this as a super fight?
At first, I thought, like, in what area does Terence Crawford beat Canelo Alvarez? And then I saw Canelo Alvarez against William Skull. Bearing in mind, you can't win a fight the way William Skull boxed. You know, you can't win boxing like that, and Crawford will know that. But I thought, well, he didn't look great there, and I thought he looked old, being honest, and I'm one of Canelo's biggest fans. However, then I watch Crawford against Madrimov, and I think you will not hold off Canelo Alvarez. You know,
Madrimov had a higher work output, though.
Look at that, yeah, but Madrimov worked harder, but I think Canelo will be able to make him work harder. Better at cutting off the ring, better at...
So, I mean, what's the size difference then on that argument? And I'm going to throw myself in the way of being observed and say that I'm a Burke. But Bivol doesn't have huge power, does he?
No.
And Bivol didn't use his power to keep Alvarez off. I know they were fighting at light heavyweight, and I know I'm comparing apples with oranges, but is the only argument to suggest that the reasons why people are light upon Canelo is because of the power that he brings, that Terence won't be able to keep him off? Yet we've seen it slightly be replicated in the Bivol fight, where Bivol's discipline and quality was able to deal with Canelo. Or am I pissing in the wind?
No, there's elements to it. I think Canelo was poor in that fight, by the way, in terms of his own standards.
Against Bivol?
Yeah. But I think that there's more to size than just power. Being able to take a shot, he's solid, Bivol. Length. Terence Crawford's very long, by the way. Just talking out in general in terms of sight, people boxing at weight classes above. Being seasoned at that weight, strength, you know, physical. Terence Crawford is long, he's strong, you know, an ex-wrestler. He's got those things to it, but Canelo is to make that jump up in weight against Canelo is a really tough ask, really tough ask. However, I don't think Canelo's anywhere near his peak, and it's just opened up. I wasn't open to defence at all. I was completely one side in Canelo's favour. But at this point, I'm now starting to. Well, I'm actually not as certain as I was, being honest.
I think this is the fight where we get greatness, and that is with Terence Crawford, because he goes and beats Canelo. He goes down in the history books. I've always said Crawford would live with any welterweight, and I've took a lot of by the way as well to go in any era, and I truly believe that, because I think the kid is that good.
That's more common.
And if he is, he beats a Canelo of this sort of level. So I wanted to throw to your question about, you know, this fight being shown on Netflix. From a business point of view, do you think that's a good thing, a bad thing? I mean, the scale of the fight.
Well, I think it's a disruptive thing. I think it's basically, and I know because I've spoken to him about it. It's about changing the landscape, because most people would have expected Turkey to have put this fight on DAZN, just bunged a bunch of money into DAZN, but put it on Netflix disrupts the thinking. It's an interesting place for a fight to land. We're seeing various spectacles land there before, but they've been Jake Paul and other people of that nature, which I'd rather shoot myself in the face. But this is a legitimate super fight. So I think obviously it'll get an audience, it'll get a big audience, but I think there's more Machiavellian thinking behind there. You know what these guys want to do, the Saudis, they want to own the boxing framework. They've been able to do it differently. They can't do it in football, they couldn't do it in golf. They have been able to do it in boxing because they've been able to cut through. Everyone's pronouncing them as the kings of boxing now.
So yes or no, do you think it's a good thing it goes on Netflix?
I don't think it matters as long as we can watch it. I'm a Netflix subscriber, so it don't matter to me.
And I think most people probably are.
Absolutely. Right, that's it for episode 125 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. Ben, thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
And we'll see you guys next time we're out, which will be next week.